This is part 5 of Lab B. We're configuring a Cisco ASA 5505 adaptive security appliance, and we're using the Cisco ASDM, a graphical browser-based management tool. So in this part, what we're going to do is we're going to set up the DMZ on the ASA. So we have VLAN 1, our inside VLAN for our inside network users, but we also want to set up a VLAN 3 for our web server so that users from outside can go through the ASA device and hit our web server. So we're going to set that up right now. To do that, we're going to go to Configuration, and we need to set up a third VLAN. So we're going to go to Interfaces. Notice it's already highlighted here, Routing, Interfaces. We'll click Add, and we need to define first which switch port we're going to use to attach to this interface. So we're going to use Ethernet port 2, which we've already chosen and plugged in on the ASA device. So we'll click Add. It's warning us that by doing this, Ethernet port 2, switch port 2, will no longer be a part of the inside interface or the inside VLAN, VLAN 1. So we'll click OK because this is what we want to do. So interface name, DMZ, security level is going to be 70, which is less than 100. So the security level is less than our inside network, VLAN 1, but more than our outside VLAN 2. So 70, enable interface is checkmarked, and we need to set up our IP address. The IP address will be 192.168.2.1. This ASA device will be the gateway for the 2 network and for our web server at 192.168.2.3. Subnet mask will be 255.255.255.0, and every time I do this, I want to click OK, but we don't want to do that yet. We need to click Advanced and set the VLAN ID from 12, which seems to be a default, and change it to 3. Also, if we want to set up a third VLAN or a third named interface with a base license on the ASA 5505, then we have to block traffic from this third VLAN to one of the other VLANs. So we're going to block traffic to VLAN 1. We don't need VLAN 3, our DMZ, to initiate traffic to our inside network users. So we'll click OK and Apply, and it will apply this configuration from the ASDM browser-based tool over to our ASA device. Now that that's taken effect, what we want to also do is set up our network address translation. Let's go back to the topology diagram, and we'll talk about that. Our web server is at 192.168.2.3. Now that's a private IP address, and this is a private network. What we need to do is translate this private address to a public address on the outside. Now we could use the IP address that's on our outside interface, which is 209.165.200.226 right here, or we could use another public IP address that we've maybe arranged for from our ISP in advance. So we're going to pretend that our ISP has given us another IP address to use for our web server or for our DMZ, and that's going to be 209.165.200.227. So we'll go back to the ASDM tool, and we're going to set up that translation right now. Now to set up the translation in this tool, it's a little bit different than in the command line interface. What we're going to do is we're going to go to Firewall, and in Firewall we're going to go to Public Servers, and we're going to click Add. And when we click Add, you can see it says Add a Public Server, and we need to tell it the private interface, which is the DMZ, the public interface, which is our outside interface, and our public IP address. So we give it the public IP address that we want to use, and now we need to set up the private IP address. So we'll click on this button right here, and it opens the Browse Private IP Address dialog box. And you can see that before I've done this before, I set this network object up before. We'll delete that so we can create it fresh. So what we're going to do is, and what you'll see is this window, and we'll click Add, and we're going to add a network object. Now you may remember doing this when we did it from the command line interface. We created a network object and we gave it a name. So what we'll do is we'll give it a name again. So DMZ-capital server, and the type host, and the IP address, private IP address of our web server. All right, 192.168.2.3. And then for NAT, we'll set up the NAT right now. Add automatic address translation rules. Okay, so these rules are going to be added automatically. This is going to open up a permission, or basically an access list, which will allow traffic through to our web server. We're going to use a static translation, and the translated address will be 209.165.200.227. That looks good. And we'll click OK. And we'll click OK. And before we click OK this next time, what we also need to do is set up our private service. So what services are we going to want to allow through to our web server? If we click on this button right here, we can tell it what protocols we want to allow through. So HTTP, TCP, we can allow that through. Double click on that. And in the lab, it says to also allow FTP. And you can scroll through and go down from TCP ports to UDP ports, TCP and UDP, and then you can see here's the ICMP protocol, and we can find our echo ICMP, double click and add that, and our echo reply. And we'll click OK. Now you can see that it looks like the private services, the port numbers, services that we want to allow through are the same as outlined in the lab. Okay. We'll click OK. And we'll click Apply. Now, if we want to look to see these access rules, the access list that was applied for this network address translation, when we set this up, what we can do is click up here on access rules, and we can see here, take a look right here, outside one incoming rule, you can see it here, and there it is. DMZ server, echo replies, HTTP and FTP permit. So there's the action. Here's the access list, or the access rule that's been set up by default by setting up that translation. Okay, that's nice. So now what we need to do is we need to test this out. So to test this out, what we can do is we can go over here, and I've got a remote desktop connection to PC-C already. So this is our remote PC at 172.16.3.3, and we could open up a web browser and see if we can reach the device. We can also just see if we can ping the device too. We'll go in here and we'll put in 209.165.200.227 and hit enter. And you can see that we do in fact reach the web server at 192.168.2.3, and we're picking up the web page. Hello, this is the Cisco CCNA Security ASA Lab B. So it was successful. Excellent. In the last part of this lab, I'm going to close this remote desktop connection. They also want us to look at the monitoring tab in the ASDM tool. So we can use the monitoring tab to monitor traffic going through the router. So we'll click on monitoring, and we'll click on interface graphs and outside, and what we want to look at is packet counts. So we're going to add that, and then we can click show graphs, and this will show us a graph of activity coming from the outside. Now that we have that, what we can do is I'm going to open up my console connection here. You can see there's the Cisco ASA device, and I'm going to switch the connection from the ASA device, and I'm going to switch it over here to R2. So now I'm connected to R2. So I'll put in the password and enable. And you can see I'm in privileged user mode now for R2. And in the lab, what they want you to do is they want you to send a ping to 209.165.200.227. Now this is the public IP address for our web server. And what we're going to do is we're going to repeat this and repeat it 1,000 times. So we'll hit enter. There goes our pings. And now what we can do is we can look at this interface and see the activity. You can look at it through a table. Every 10 seconds. There's the activity showing up now on this table. Okay, there's the activity. Excellent. All right, we can also look at this traffic from the PC inside the inside network. So what we're going to do is we will look at it from PCB. So now what I'll do is I'll just open up a command prompt. Right now I am PCB, so I can open up a command prompt. And from PCB we can also issue a ping. This time they want us to issue a ping from to 209.165.200.225. Now that is the IP address of R1 serial interface, and what we can do is do an end count 1,000 and send 1,000 more echo requests. So there goes the ping, and that's coming from inside the network. And so now we've got the pings that went from outside and now from inside. We can take a look at this graph and see the status. Close that and take a look here. So that's the outside interface. We could also do the inside interface. Click Show Graphs. And you can see traffic count here, coming through here. All right, let's issue that ping again. There it goes. There's the replies. I'll go back and look at it again from the outside interface. And here come the replies. Okay, that's it for Lab B, Cisco ASA using the ASDM graphical management tool.